My life be like, ooh, yeah. My life be like, yeah.
Let's go ahead and get going just a little bit. I wanted you guys to be able to kind of chat for just a little bit. Curtis, as you know, this is episode 1.
Yep.
First off, I'd like to welcome you to the Fluence Podcast. What we're hoping to accomplish here in the Fluence Podcast is really to connect with leaders that we feel like are high achievers, but also that get it, right? Leaders that actually have a giver's mindset. They have an abundance mentality. They are looking to be able to improve their lives in their business, but more importantly than that, their personal lives, their family lives, the communities around them, and really make waves so that they can actually move things forward in every area of their life. And so that's part of the reason when we were talking about one, who we wanted to actually come and engage with us as we have our mastermind, or we have kind of a learning session with our members. We called you. You were one of the first calls that we had, and we're excited to be able to have you come on next week. That's also why I'm excited to have this conversation today on the Fluence Podcast. I want to give just a little bit of an intro, and then we'll kind of dive in just a little bit. But before I kind of talk about what you actually have accomplished, there's a couple of things as I was reading through your bio that I was letting you know that I didn't know about. So I'll read through a little bit of that. But just before that, Curtis and I have had a friendship for quite some time. It did start it through business, through kind of some business retreats and those types of things. So we've had the opportunity to travel together. We've had the opportunity to see each other at various different events and then talk on the phone various times. And something that we were just talking about just before starting, just a few seconds ago, is we have one of those relationships that, you know, when you talk to somebody, it feels like you just picked up, even if it's been, and we've probably had a couple years between conversations sometimes.
Yeah.
And you pick up right where it left off. And yeah, I'm assuming that you have that relationship with a lot of people. You're just that type of person that you're authentic. You are interested in other people. And with that kind of mentality, it makes it pretty easy to just continue and build a relationship, even with time kind of in between. So
Thanks, Jordan.
this is
Yeah.
publicly. Thank you for being that kind of a person. I super appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Yeah. Always love chatting with you. I'm going to just read a little bit, and then I want this to be a little bit more of just a conversation kind of between us. There are a couple different books that Curtis has written, and we're going to be discussing one of those today, and I'll let him kind of explain a little bit of what that is. And as we were talking a little bit before the podcast, we were talking about, well, what's the purpose? What are we going to kind of talk about here? And what we're going to be talking about is kind of Curtis's journey up to the point of writing his first book and then writing his second book, and why these things that he's talked with me extensively about are important to him, and where he kind of arrived at doing that. And so we'll do that, but a little bit, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of insight as to what Curtis has done. So Curtis has built and led 5 companies, achieving as high as 20x growth and serving 96 of the Fortune 100. So he has been a high achiever in those things. He's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of his book, The Entrepreneur's Paradox, which I do have that book, and has worked with industry giants, including NASA, Amazon, Apple, Disney, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Mercedes. I could go on and on. His business achievements have earned recognition such as Entrepreneur of the Year, 40 Under 40, being 500 and 5,000 Hall of Fame status. So a lot of different, I mean, I could read on and on, but there's, what I want to kind of get at is Curtis is a high achiever. He also is that right type of person. So really, you epitomize what we're looking for as we're building Fluence, is kind of that balance of achieving a ton and also along the entire way looking for how you can help benefit and bless other people. And so, yeah, I'm excited to kind of jump in and talk a little bit. Also want to just introduce John Bailey. He's here as well. He's the founder of Fluence, and he's actually been working for 15 plus years, helping bring communities together, having masterminds, relationships. I've spent a lot of time with John, and I see him multiple times a day saying, oh, this person needs to connect with that person. Whether they're part of our group or not, he just gives and gives. And because of that, he's also had success. And so, John, Curtis, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. This feels so formal, but really want to kind of dive in. Curtis, like, why don't you introduce your 2 books, talk about what we're going to be talking about with the Fluence group next week, just a little bit, and then we'll kind of back up and kind of get into how you arrived there. But if you wouldn't mind first sharing kind of the two books, and then kind of going that way.
Yeah. Yeah, happy to. So, and you talked about the journey. The definitely part of the journey was transitioning from being a tech CEO and president of different companies, writing a book about entrepreneurship. It's called the Entrepreneur's Paradox, and that journey is a very different journey than the journey I'm on now. And, and life has a funny way of doing that, is of taking us to exactly the place we need to be in, regardless of whether we want to be there or not. It has an amazing way to help us get there. And so just a smidge about this book. It's called The Entrepreneur's Paradox. It's the 16 pitfalls that every entrepreneur makes, and how to avoid those pitfalls. And then the book that I'm currently writing and the work that I'm doing now, as you can see from the shirt, is called Counterfeit Emotions. And um, again, very, very different than any of the tech companies that I've started in the past. Completely different field, completely different feel of what's going on. And so I loved when we talked about, you want to get the right people in because they're the kind of people that are givers, that are doing good in the world. And yeah, that's where we find the joy. That's where we find the peace, and super excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. John, is there anything I could talk quite a bit. One thing I feel like I started this like so like formal. I the conversation that we had right before we jumped in, like if I'm listening to podcasts, that's really kind of what I want to listen to is like a couple guys talking with each other. So I don't know. I kind of started it pretty formally. I think let's be a little bit less formal and kind of jump in as we can. But as we're kind of hearing Curtis's conversation, but John, was there anything you kind of wanted to add before we jump in?
No, I'm excited to learn from Curtis. I think that there is, having been through. I love what you said, Curtis, about life has a way of getting you what you need. Um, a little over 9 months ago, my oldest son was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh,
Um, Happened to be uh, up in Alaska, had been out for almost a year, serving an LDS mission for his church, and had to come home early and deal with this huge tumor the size of a large cantaloupe in his chest that was making it so he couldn't breathe.
oh wow.
And that was an interesting journey, and we thought we overcame it, and then turns out it came back, and they had to change the recipe and the treatment, and then honestly we thought, okay, this is going to be it, and then they said, no, we want to do one last Hail Mary to make sure, and they liken it to dropping a nuclear bomb in his body and do 6 days of treatment in a row, one a day, for 6 days, and took him right to the edge of the cliff, as they say. And they are going to push over cancer, and they're going to try to keep him on the top of the cliff without pushing him over. And he scraped the bottom of the barrel for a while. We weren't sure if we were going to keep him. And I would never sign up to do that experience ever again.
Hmm.
And yet, so good for all of us. It's hard to talk about sometimes, but it was really good. And I'm grateful for the hard, and I'm super grateful for the struggles and the challenges. But at the same time, I see the growth, and I have a lot more empathy for those that go through that experience. Yeah, like it brings tears to my eyes just now. Like we know a lot of people, once you buy the red Corolla, you see red Corollas everywhere,
Hmm.
if you will. And it's a lot more easy to love and care about all those that are driving a red Corolla. So
Yeah.
anyway, I related. I love it. I'm excited to hear more.
Thanks for sharing that with us, John. That's, yeah, that is so hard. That's so hard. And that is one of those inflection points in life where you step back, you reevaluate everything. You say, wait a minute, what is really important in my life?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, a lot of the meetings that John and I have had have been him. They've been down at Huntsman. So from the hotel room or from different things, it's been a lot of the part of your life right now. And so, anyways, thank you for still spending the time as we've been building this. Um, Curtis, I don't know that your journey was exactly that, but it's interesting. We all have kind of we're actually having a conversation a little bit about this, but we each have things that are going to prove us or test us to our limits. And each of us have kind of those different experiences. And I don't know if some of this journey, we actually didn't talk about this, about what that journey kind of was. And I kind of left it a little bit so we could kind of talk about it authentically here of like, what has that journey been? So, um, kind of in that, spirit of just being kind of open and vulnerable, like, Curtis, would you mind kind of sharing with us, like, so it sounds like maybe this is something that happened after the entrepreneur's paradox. Um, and quite honestly, it probably was something that has been, um, through our lives kind of shape us. I'm sure it wasn't a single incident. So maybe kind of walk us through kind of what that journey was like.
Yeah. Tell us your story. I want to know.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Oh, yeah. So about 8 years ago, I was running company. We were amazingly blessed to be the fastest growing company in the Silicon Slopes, and I was running it with my business partner. Things from the outside, things looked amazing. You
Mhm.
know, number one fastest growing company. We're on the Inc. 500 year after year after year, 13th fastest growing education company in the country. Like all of these amazing things that seem to be going right.
Mhm.
Um, Unfortunately, in my personal life, things weren't going so well. And and I went through a divorce, one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. And John, just like you were saying, wouldn't want to wish it on anyone. N- No, not at all. And at the same time, I'm so grateful for the pain that came with it. I'm so grateful for the teacher that came in the form of pain. And it was more pain than I've ever experienced. And I was an absolute mess. And my business partner and I sat down and we both agreed. We're like, I'm not the right person for the job right now. That's not me. And I need to step down. And and as I was losing my title and my position at the company, I was losing my family. There was so much, I call it my Job moment. Um, and and I had a friend who was about a year behind me. His name's Jerry Williamson. He's about a year behind me in his divorce. And Jerry's the kind of guy that makes an entire room full of people laugh. You see Jerry walk in the room, and you know your belly's gonna hurt because you're just gonna laugh so much. And great, just great human. And he would come over, and his humor was just hilarious. But every time he'd leave my house, he'd go, Curtis, I hate you. I'm like, Jerry, why do you hate me? And he goes, because every time I come over, you make me cry, and I hate crying. And we did. We sat in my living room and we shared our hearts with each other, and we opened up about the pain. And um, mm, this part still hurts. Jerry was one of my best friends through college. And as Jerry was going through his trial, his pain, he didn't understand the difference between pain and misery. He didn't understand the difference between guilt and shame, or recovery and sobriety. And and about a year later, Jerry left us. And I'm not okay with how he left us. I'm not okay with that piece of his journey because I truly believe if he would have understood the difference between pain and misery, if he would have understood how healthy guilt is and how destructive shame is, if he would have understood some of the principles that that can change a person's life, he would still be with us. I have a firm belief that he would still be with us. And the book hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller, and my publisher, they're like, "Hey, let's write a three-book series." And I was right in the middle of my second book, which is called The Timeline of Business, which talks about, not only does every entrepreneur make the same mistakes, but they make them in the same order. They make all the mistakes. Like if you tell me where you're at in your journey, I can fairly accurately tell you what's coming next because there's an order to the timeline of business. And I called up my publisher and I'm like, "Hey, I know this did great. I know we've got another book halfway written, but I need to put it on the shelf. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever come back to it because I need to write a very different book. And that book is called Counterfeit Emotions." And that's what got me today was diving deep into things that I had completely wrong in my life and in my belief system. Completely wrong. Like if you would have asked me 10 years ago, what just asked me about pain, what is pain? I would have associated the word bad with pain. That something is bad. If I'm feeling pain, then either I'm bad, my choices are bad, my situation's bad. There's bad in the mix of pain. And and in my perspective, I thought there was this big wall. There was this impenetrable wall, and on one side of the wall was pain, and on the other side of the wall was joy. You got pain or you've got love, you've got pain or you've got joy. And and this wall was absolutely making the two exclusionary, that
Mhm.
you don't get both. It's impossible. And and when this happened with Jerry and with what happened in my situation, and I found myself weeping to the point where I didn't even know if I could stop. I felt more pain than I've ever felt in my life. I wanted a mountain to fall on top of me. I felt so much pain. And at the same time, I felt love. I felt God's love. I felt joy and it broke my brain. It was like, wait, there's a wall. There's this wall. You can't mix. You know, what about the wall? And I'm just like racking my brain to try and figure out, well, how am I feeling pain and joy? What about the wall? And that's when I realized this side of the wall is not called pain. This side of the wall is misery. And misery, by definition, is the absence of joy. That's what's on this side of the wall. This side of the wall is joy and love, but I get to choose. I get to choose where I put my pain. I can bury it deep underneath that tar and sludge of misery. And misery consists of two base elements. First is blame, and the second is shame. That I can bury my pain under the blame and shame, or I can change sides and I can put it on the side of joy. I can put it on the side of love, and I can honor it and elevate the pain. And instead of turning it into misery, it turns into a very sacred sorrow, a very beautiful, healing, growing experience in my life. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, if this is not pain and I've been calling it the wrong thing my whole life, are there other counterfeits? Are there other counterfeits that are I'm thinking I'm living in a virtue, but really I'm just living in the counterfeit? And I started down this journey. I started down this path. I'm like, wait a minute, if there's a counterfeit for pain and misery, what others are there? And I dug deep and I was like, okay, I've got to get a book. I've got to do a seminar. I've got to go on a retreat. I've got to do something. And and I realized that the reason I had never learned this till I was over 40 was because there is no book. There is no manual. There's no writings. The closest thing I found to this was a Buddhist teaching called Near Enemies and Far Enemies. And that's definitely not a one-for-one comparison. But I started digging and I realized every single every single emotion that serves us, that takes us where we want to go, has a counterfeit, except for one. There's only one emotion that can't be counterfeited, and that emotion is peace. It's the only one. And so I started digging, and for the last 7, almost 8 years now, I've been dedicating my life to the research around this, to understanding what are those counterfeits and how do they affect our lives.
Explain to me just a little bit more, like, how is peace able to be that one single solitary? I have my own ideas, but I think you've researched this and studied this out and really dove deep into it. So tell me just a little bit more so I can more fully understand that just a little bit. And it'll either confirm or it'll help clarify some of my thoughts around it.
Well, I would love to hear your thoughts, Jordan. Like, yeah, throw them out.
Yeah. So, I mean, my
John, I can
thoughts,
tell you've got some good ones too.
well, just as you were kind of saying, I love that you kind of broke each of these things down. It's things are much more complex than they are just at the surface. It's pretty easy to just give a label to something and say, okay, that is all encompassing. But really, as we kind of study out life and we understand there's actually so much complexity to every component of life. And as you were kind of talking about misery, there's some building blocks to misery. I would assume that there's also some building blocks to peace. And so the building blocks that are to peace are built out of those that are not the counterfeits, is kind of what I kind of am imagining in my head. It's like, okay, this is actually, um, let's say maybe joy as opposed to just happiness, or maybe it is also built of pain as opposed to misery. It's something that is like, I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but something that I think about is as you're kind of explaining kind of the pain and the misery, something I've thought a decent amount about is stress. And stress can actually be a very positive thing. I mean, we think about like when we're in stressful situations. I've been out hunting and we're on top of a mountain and all of a sudden a lightning storm comes up and all of a sudden it's a very stressful moment. And it's a stress that really promotes action. I mean, it is like, okay, heart's racing, adrenaline, like we
Yeah.
need to act now. And
Hmm.
it promotes action. And that is a stress, but it is a life-saving stress. Stress can also get to a balance where all of a sudden, boom, all of a sudden it becomes a promoter of inaction, a promoter of distress, a promoter that it actually leads instead of to life, it leads to destruction. And so I think that's in my head as you're kind of describing this, that's where I kind of think these emotions that are similar in my mind can maybe promote or lead you towards light or can actually discourage and degrade and lead you toward darkness. I don't know if that's kind of how you've thought about that, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And and one thing I want to emphasize is there's no such thing as a bad emotion. If you notice the language I use, I don't say there's bad emotions and good emotions, but every one of the counterfeit and authentic dyads is actually part of a pendulum. And all our lives we learn opposite emotions, right? And this is one of my favorite dyads is that nice is the counterfeit of kind. And yet, when people hear this, they're like, wait a minute. I've been told my whole life, be nice. Santa has his naughty and nice list. Thumper, Bambi's best friend. He tells me if you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. Like we're taught our entire lives to be nice. And It turns out nice is nothing more than a defense mechanism to avoid conflict. That we see the potential for conflict, and nice says, "Oh, I've got to avoid it. I'm going to be the yes man. I'm going to be that smiley, happy friend. I'm going to be, put on the manners and all of the things to be nice so that I can avoid any potential conflict." And kind, instead of just being a defense mechanism, kind is the virtue. Because every opportunity there is for conflict, there's opportunity for connection. Every time. Every time. And kind says, I'm not gonna avoid the conflict. I'm gonna transform the conflict into connection. And the reason I bring this up is to go to your question is this is a great example of that pendulum. Like we often hold up this great big heavy ball called nice. I'm not going to share my opinion. I'm going to placate. I'm going to be the doormat, and I'm going to hold up this ball, and it gets really heavy, and we let it go. And what happens is it swings all the way to the other side. And then all of a sudden, this nice guy turns out to be not so nice anymore. And we go from nice to I can't handle it anymore, and now all of a sudden I'm mean. And and when we stop the swings, when there's no more mood swings, right in the center, that's where we find kind. And so on one side is the counterfeit, the other side is the opposite, but right in the center, where we don't have to swing back and forth, that's where we find the virtue. That's where we find that emotion that serves us. And and you asked about peace. I want to make sure we don't skip over that one too.
Yeah.
And John, if you had any other thoughts on peace or
I,
questions.
well, the only thought before you jump into peace, I remember a dear friend of mine who is the department head at BYU, Idaho, Johan Delton. I love Johan, and he taught me years ago that, to be honest and kind sometimes means you have to help people be accountable, and you have to help them see the mistakes that they're making. And
Yes.
if you care about them, which you should, then sometimes you have to do hard things,
Yeah.
and not be nice. You have to be kind and tell them, that they're hurting themselves or others or whatever. And I remember, like, to your point, I had to wrestle with that, like, wait, what? This doesn't fit the framework that I had all my life. And you're telling me something and it resonates and it's true, but that means I've got to change now.
Yeah.
I can't operate based on how I have been. I now have to do things differently because I know that what you just taught me is true. And so I'm not doing it justice, but I learned some valuable lessons from him, and I'm grateful. I'm sure there's lots more that he could teach me, but
Yeah. And you nailed some key points there. Is nice leans out. Nice is like, hey, you stay over there. I'm going to smile at you while you're over there, but let's not get too close. But hey, how's it going? Let's grab lunch sometime. Oh, you're great. I'm a used car salesman. Yeah. And nice will put on the smile, and it will be your best friend until you don't buy the car. And then what happens is again that pendulum swing. And and kind leans in. Kind says, I care enough about you to have a potentially hard conversation. Remember that conflict, but transform that into connection. And when I share something with you by invitation, not by force, not by control, coercion, but by invitation, when you accept that invitation and I share maybe a hard message with you, if it hurts, I'm going to be there with you in the pain. I'm gonna be there. It's not gonna be the swing over to the mean side. And it's so funny. Every time I've given this presentation, especially like for singles conferences and things like that, guaranteed some lady will come up and she's like, "Good, now I can tell off my ex." I'm like, no, 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 you're missing the whole point. The
Right.
swing. We gotta stop the swing. Because she had been submissive and passive her whole life, and
Mm.
the nice girl. And now she's like, okay, now I can be direct, But if we take it too far, then it turns to mean, where being direct is kind, being honest, being saying, hey, I see a destructive pattern in your life. Would it be okay if I shared that with you? And then when they say yes, being there for them through the process, that's part of what makes kind so powerful, is that it's full of love. It's full of true care. Whereas nice is not safe. Nice can never be safe because because it starts with I'm just going to say whatever you want. I'm going to tell you how great you are and boss, you're the best ever. And it creates these unsafe environments because I don't feel like I can actually express myself when I see something that needs to be said. And in the US today, they actually did a study on this. There's $493 billion in lost revenue because of nice culture. 493 billion that's lost each year. And because we want to be nice and it's so destructive. It's so destructive. Yeah. So,
I think this is what you said you're going to be talking about next week, is you have about a half hour to kind of present on it.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so are you, just a question as you present on it, and I'm actually happy for you to present either way, but is it going to be a little bit more like this is how you can apply it to your personal life? This is how you can apply it to your business life? The way I'm kind of hearing it in my head is this is actually, it should be applied all the way around everywhere. But
It definitely is. Kind can heal. Kind can heal people. It can create safety in companies and families. Yeah. So we'll be talking about both. We'll be talking about how does this apply to me personally, but also how does this apply to my business?
yeah,
And what is the downfall of being nice versus being kind? And I'm speaking at a conference, a California conference called the Hero Forum, on this topic as well. And it's amazing what happens when you change your culture from nice to kind. It's
yeah,
amazing. It's so much faster. I know we're going to talk all about this next week, but
yeah.
it's incredible. Um, and I want to hit your question. Oh, Bill, John, you had a
No, yes, I was like, hey, I we gotta. There's this cliffhanger, and we got to talk about peace.
yeah.
And then when you're done talking about peace, I wanted to just explore like other counterfeit emotions that you might hit on next week. Like, what are the other ones? Because
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh, I want to learn more. This is what you just taught is amazing. Okay, what else? Right?
Yeah.
So,
There's actually I've distilled it down to 42 different dyads or
uh,
pairs of emotions. And so we can talk about that. But okay, to the cliffhanger. Here we go. Why is peace the only emotion that can't be counterfeited? This is fascinating. There's so much behind this. There's like intellectual, there's spiritual reasons, but the neuroscience of this is fascinating. The neuroscience is just amazing because every emotion we feel has a sensory perception. Every one of them, except for peace. Peace is the only emotion without a sensory perception. And what I mean by that, what I mean by sensory perception, excitement. Excitement is filled, your body actually gets adrenaline. You were talking about distress and the different things. There's another term called eustress. EU stress, like dysphoria and euphoria, and distress and eustress. Stress is not bad. What we do with stress
Right.
changes the outcome. And eustress, instead of fight or flight like distress, eustress, I call it thrill and skill. When you get into a state of eustress, when you're excited about the stress, that's why wingsuit jumpers can throw themselves off cliffs, and motorcycles riders can do double flips, and that's eustress. When you get excited, it actually creates higher, heightened levels of acuity, heightened levels of performance. You actually become better, faster. Your response time increases. The exact opposite happens with distress, that
Yeah.
shutting down. And and so that's one of those pairs. But
Mhm.
Okay, here we go with peace. Is that peace doesn't have that. Like with eustress and distress, both of them have adrenaline. They have these brain chemicals that are activated, and the neuroscience behind peace is absolutely fascinating. Like there's a couple different camps of thought that one camp says peace is what's left over when there's no other emotions. When everything is scraped away, the base state of us as humans is peace.
Hmm.
Another camp is that peace is a combination of all of the emotions, and it's a transcendence into a higher level of thinking, a higher level of being. And but the brain science behind it is fascinating. Like where do we actually feel peace in the brain or in the body? And it's fascinating because you can you can see all the other emotions, but peace stands completely alone. It stands completely alone. And and this may actually be a really concrete way to wrap the brain around it, is that the definition of a counterfeit emotion is an emotion that looks, acts, and feels like an authentic emotion, but it creates destructive cycles of disconnection in our lives. So nice looks like kind, right? Everybody gets the two mixed up. Guilt and shame. For the last 100 years, if you look at any research study, except for about 5 or 10 years ago with Brene Brown and the University of Oslo, um, all of the studies, it says the guilt slash shame study. Like these are the researchers, these are the scientists. Shame does such a good job of counterfeiting guilt that it's that they didn't even know that they were different emotions. Like, and so it looks and acts and feels like it puts on the clothing and wears the mask of that emotion so well that we don't even recognize it. Love and lust is another one that like you think about, wait, it's easy to see love and hate because they're on the opposite end of the spectrum. Love says hug, hate says hit. Well, what about love and lust? Lust says kiss and love says kiss. It's the exact same action. That's why they're so dangerous. That's why they're so sneaky, is because we don't even know when we're feeling these. Um, and John, to your question about, well, tell us some of the other ones. Um, some of them that are really important are, especially in the business world, is power versus control. Power is what lives inside. Control is what we try to do to the outside. Power is what we're born with. Power is it lives in us. Control is what we pretend to do. Control is an illusion. There is no control. There is, and the older I get, the more convinced I am of that.
Sounds like you have some teenagers, because I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And another one we hit on is abundance versus accumulation. And it sounds like this group is incredibly abundant, that they serve, they help. Abundance says live large to give large. Accumulation says live large to get large. How many cars and watches and shoes and Armani suits and all of the things can I get to fill in the hole of my worth?
Yeah.
Where abundance says, yes, I am gonna live large so that I can give large, so that I can help more people, and I'm gonna be a steward, that's one of my favorite dyads, is that ownership is the counterfeit of stewardship.
Hmm.
That everything we own, or excuse me, everything we think we own actually owns us. Think on that one for a minute. Everything we think we own actually owns us.
Something interesting to what you had just said right before that. I could think about that for a bit, but something that was going through my head as you were kind of talking about it, when you were saying if we're looking to be able to give, and abundance is the more we get, the more we're able to give. A lot of these you're talking about, I've studied a lot of Buddhism and Taoism, as I was actually planning on moving to China for a business that I was building. And I wanted to be able to serve the people there as well as I could. And so that's the main purpose I studied Buddhism and Taoism. I've studied a lot of different religions. My family is kind of almost every religion you can think of. And to be able to understand and be able to serve people, you need to be able to understand where they're coming from, their frame of mind. And so I've been trying to kind of, yeah, we have kind of a wealth bucket and there's an education bucket. And part of that education bucket, in my opinion, is also kind of ways of thinking. And a lot of what you've been talking about actually is very aligned with kind of Buddhism and Taoism. And I tried to study those things so that I could better serve them and so that I could do that. And it's really enriched my way of thinking where I'm like, okay, wow, I understand a lot of the things that you're talking about are really related to that. Even I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, LDS,
Mhm.
and something that's important to me is revelation and understanding revelation. And as we look at lots of different modes of thinking, I understand revelation and understand those types of things in a much more holistic and I think in a much better way than I did personally before. And so, anyways, just a lot of things that you're talking about. And if you're looking to accumulate that for the purpose of serving others, man, it puts you in the right frame of mind to be able to say, okay, we're not doing it to get something out of it, but man, we get so much more out of it when we do give.
Right.
Um, we don't have much more time. Um, I want to continue this conversation. We're going to continue it some next week as we're doing that, but maybe let's ask you a question that doesn't have to do with your book and those types of things, that is directly related to exactly what I just mentioned of when have you found an opportunity when you've served that has had the most impact on your life, whether it has to do with this book or not. Like, when is an opportunity or something that you've been able to have an opportunity where you've given and you've gotten your life enriched from that more than any other that you think?
Ooh, more than any other. That's
I know
hmm.
that's difficult. That's kind of why I'm asking it.
Oh, yeah, the one that comes to mind, and this is not business related, um, but one that really comes to mind is part of what we do. One of the dyads is that sobriety is the counterfeit of recovery,
Hmm.
and sobriety is actually a trap that keeps people stuck in the problem. Whether it's pornography, drugs, alcohol, doesn't matter what it is, gambling, shopping, excessive exercise, like, um, and we've actually created some pornography recovery programs around this, and and it's it's crazy because every single time we're together with these amazing men, many of them CEOs, every single time that we're together, I I walk out and there's just tears in my eyes because these men are finding true healing. They're finding that one emotion that can't be counterfeited. That one navigational emotion that says, I'm getting closer to God, to who I want to be, to the man that really is inside. And there's been so many times we'll finish and I'll sit out in my car in the dark and just cry and just in so much gratitude that God has given me a message to be able to share, to be able to help people in their lives and heal them, heal their marriages, heal their families, and and break them out of this sobriety mindset into a true recovery where they don't have to go back to those behaviors anymore and they can wake up instead of with a pit in their stomach every day thinking, is today my last day? Wake up with a feeling of peace, with a feeling of joy, with actually one of the guys from a couple cohorts ago, he came with his wife. We start the first and last meeting with the spouses, and now we're doing a whole spouse program. But one of the things that one of the spouses said, she goes, when I worked in the first meeting, it was like Pleasantville. It was like the entire room was just gray with all these men that were so full of shame and full of all these things. And she said, and now it's like we're in Technicolor. Everyone, like all of a sudden, life is bright and there's so much hope and there's so much just joy in this room. And I'll tell you what, I know that they sign up for them, but every single time, every single time, my life is better.
Yeah, I love that. As you know, those that are listening may not know, but I spent 15 years building a nonprofit as well. But instead of being anti-pornography, it was a pro-virtue movement. And some conversations, Curtis, we have had is as you're looking towards what we are doing well, and we're not looking at perfectionism, but we're looking at actually excellence.
hmm One of those
It
true
brings,
dyads.
yeah,
Yeah.
it brings that light and it brings that color in, and it's a place where we can stand and we can enjoy the ground we've already gained, and we can continue to look forward and be excited about that next horizon that we can see. Um, Man, I'm really excited about next week. I wish that we had another hour that we could spend doing this. Um,
Yeah.
we have maybe 2 more minutes. Is there any last thing that you would like to add before I kind of just close us out?
Um, actually, yeah, the with counterfeit emotions, there's four criteria, and we can get into these next week. But very quickly, anyone can identify in a minute's time if they're feeling the authentic or the counterfeit. And the way you can do that is by what I call the four criteria. The four criteria are connection, direction, motivation, and valuation. Is does what I'm feeling connect me? Because every authentic emotion is connection. All of the counterfeits disconnect. They break us from that connection. Then the second one, and I know I'm just skimming this, there's so much more
Hmm.
to it. But the second one is direction. Where does this emotion take me? Every authentic emotion takes me forward, upward, or brings me together. Every counterfeit emotion, this was fascinating. When I did the research on this, I thought it'd be the opposite, right? Just
Yeah.
backwards, downwards. It's not. It's
Hmm.
fascinating because there's only one direction for a counterfeit emotion, and that direction is back to itself. It just circles.
Hmm.
You think about pain and misery. Pain says no pain, no gain because it takes you to gain. Misery, it also has a saying,
Hmm.
right? Misery loves
Company.
company
Yeah.
because it has to come back to itself.
Hmm.
Every counterfeit that's the only direction is back to that emotion, is that
Hmm.
misery needs misery to survive. Fear fuels fear, anxiety breeds anxiety. You have all of these emotions that only come back to themselves. So you look at the direction, where does this emotion take me? Is it taking me forward, upward, or together, or is it just spinning on itself over and over and over again?
Hmm.
Um, then the third is motivation. Where does this emotion based in? Every authentic emotion is based in love and surrender. And surrender is one of my favorite. It's one of the most transcendent emotions you can feel. It's amazing. So love and surrender. Every counterfeit is based in fear and control. And this is one easy one for me because I know what fear feels like.
Yeah.
Physiologically in my body, fear feels like that rapid heart rate, the shallow breathing, feels like a steel band just like across my chest,
Mhm.
squeezing in. And I'm like, oh, there it is.
Yep.
There's fear. I know you. This is my old friend fear. Okay. And I can say, oh, I'm in a counterfeit right now. That's what I'm feeling. And and so when I want to control or when I feel that fear, I'm like, there it is. There's the counterfeit. And now it's time to take that right turn and straight into the authentic. Um, and then the final one is valuation. What does this emotion value me at? Does it recognize my divine worth? My worth beyond my titles, beyond my money, beyond my whatever? Does it recognize what's inside that cannot be changed? If it does, that's authentic. If it says, you know what, you're worthless, then, and not just worthless, you're worth less. That we're going to
Yeah.
start you at zero. Now let's compare and say, well, Jordan's so much cooler in this way, and John is awesome, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, and then we're worth less and less and less. Those are the counterfeits. And with that criteria, it very simply you can ask yourself at any moment in the day, is this authentic or is this counterfeit? And you can have that as your compass, that is your guide.
Man, with each topic you're bringing up, each point, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. Um, yeah. So
No, where did the hour go? Dang it.
Right?
I know.
It's so short. So short.
Well, I am excited about next week. Excited to be able to be with you. And I'm really grateful that we have opportunities to talk fairly often. And we said this last time we talked, whether it was a few days ago or, but we need to have more discussions. Curtis, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm gonna, again, this first podcast, so we'll kind of close out just reiterating like what we're building with Fluence. We're looking for people just like Curtis Morley. We're looking for people that are thinking about life in a way that impacts their own lives so that they can impact others. And you are embodying that. That's what we're trying to do. And so thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing a little bit with us so that I can understand things and think about things deeper and in a different way. This is, I don't know, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I appreciate you being here. Um, Again, anybody who's listening, hopefully you can join us next week as we actually are able to hear without me interrupting every few minutes to say, oh, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. Um, I'm excited to go through and kind of hear what you have to say. We'll have about 30 minutes to hear from Curtis, and we'll have a 10-minute Q&A. And then we're going to break into groups with other business owners to discuss how these topics actually influence us in the lives that we have and the things that we're trying to push forward. And so that's really one of the components of the Fluence Mastermind that we do every single month. And so, anyways, we'd like to invite you to come. And one last huge thank you, Curtis. Thank you very much for being here.